Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. It's 1 minute past, so we'll just wait a little bit longer because I can see the attendee numbers going up. So we'll just let a couple more people join, and then we'll get started. Right, it's going up fast. I think we'll get going. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. Welcome to this Ortecha webinar on why enterprise AI fails, the data problems nobody fixed first. In some ways, I feel quite relieved that we're discussing this, as I've been banging on about this for about the last 15 years. And now I think it's getting the attention it deserves. So thank you, OpenAI, for launching ChatGPT in 2022, because I think that's triggered what we're seeing today. In case you don't know, Ortecha is the human-first data and technology consulting firm that helps organizations operate more effectively and use AI successfully. We really focus on three foundations around trusted data. We're really going to touch on that today. Effective governance and connected enterprise knowledge, which should mean better operations, more reliable analytics, safer automation and AI, of course, and AI that understands the business context in which it's working. So today we're going to discuss why enterprise AI initiatives often struggle to deliver reliable value at scale. I think we're probably all seeing this with some of the hype around pilots. No, it's not all bad, of course, and we'll talk about that quite a bit today. Why the issue indeed is not usually the AI model, they're really clever, but the enterprise foundations underneath it. We did recently publish an article on this, and we're going to drop the links to that in the chat. We've got a hub page on the website around I knew I wasn't going to be able to say it, operationalization of AI. And there's 3 articles we've published on there recently, and this is the first in a series of 3 webinars. And just to say, I think this is the highest number of registrations we've had for a webinar. So clearly the topic is resonating with people. So I hope we get lots of questions from you as we go through today. So before we dive into the discussion, we'll quickly go through some housekeeping. All of the attendees have joined with video and microphones muted, and they won't be turned back on. So please do use the chat. If you have a question, there is a Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom window. So please do pop your question in there, and we'll keep an eye on that as we go through, and then will be 10 minutes for questions at the end. Please don't drop them into the chat window because they can get a bit lost in that window. But we do encourage you to use the chat function throughout the webinar to discuss and debate with each other and type your reactions in there. That's a really good thing to do. We also have Louise from our team in the chat and helping in the background. I think she'll be dropping some of the links into the chat now. So any miscellaneous questions, please do drop them in and Louise will pick those up. And if you do need to leave early, this will be done within the hour, but it has been recorded and you can follow up and watch the rest of it on demand. So let's dive into the discussions. And before we do that, we'll do intros. So just a brief one from me first. Pete Youngs, founding partner at Ortecha. I'm actually a data architect by trade, and now I help organizations embed what I hope is excellent data management practices so that they can be successful with AI, but before the AI hype cycle, frankly, be successful in their business through great use of data. And I've got 3 fantastic guests with me today, so I'll let them introduce themselves and I'll hand over to you first, please, Lisa.
Great. Thanks, Pete. And thank you for having me. I'm very excited about the discussion today. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Lewis, Head of Data Governance, Privacy, and Compliance for the Enterprise Data Organization at S&P Global. I've held several roles with the company over 27 years across data and technology, operations, project and product management, and landed most recently in data governance as the voice from all those roles that needed the data governance in order for any of my projects to be successful.
Thanks, Lisa. And over to you, please, Barry.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Pete. I'm Barry. I'm currently the Chief Data Officer for the Howden Group, which is insurance. Before that, I was the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at John Lewis Partnership, and I've also been the Group CDAO at Lloyds Banking Group, the UK's largest retail bank. So I'm a data person by trade, so I think it should be obvious why I'm here and why I'm interested in this.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. And over to you, please, Mark.
Thanks, Pete. So Mark McQueen, I'm the managing partner for Ortecha in North America. We have Canadian and U.S. operations. I reside in Nashville, Tennessee. 22-year background at a very large global bank. Lisa puts me to shame at 27. It makes me feel like a short timer at 22. But during that time, I actually came from a business process design background that led me to a data project that 2 years later, I discovered I was now a data guy rather than a process design guy. Have been consulting now for 10 years and joined Ortecha about 7 years out of that period.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And thank you so much for joining us today, Mark, Lisa, and Barry. So this is centered around the article today that we've mentioned, and Louise will have dropped the link into the chat. So starting with you, Mark, the article opens with a simple but powerful point that AI doesn't know our workarounds. So for years, and this is why I'm quite relieved that we're talking about this, organizations have managed to live with data problems because people knew like which report to trust, which definition applied, who to ask when two systems disagreed, and where the unofficial source of truth could be found. AI doesn't really know this. It doesn't have that experience or informal business context. So why does this matter so much as we embrace, adopt, and experiment with AI? And really, as we look at pilots and pilots move beyond controlled pilots into real business processes and decisions.
So I think this is the biggest mindset shift. And as you pointed out, Pete, it's being driven by AI that has a different set of requirements, a different set of expectations for data. For years, people have quietly made the enterprise work despite messy data. Again, as you said, they knew which report to trust. They knew what definition applied to the data, who to call when systems disagreed with each other, and where the real business context resided, and brought that to the forefront with a manual labor kind of approach. AI doesn't have that institutional memory. It doesn't know those workarounds. Unless that's documented, we're leaving AI just to use statistical analysis to produce answers for us and not really understanding our business. So AI just works with what it's given. So when those informal workarounds move into operational AI, they become risk. Yeah, the question's not just whether AI can produce an answer. We know that it can, but it's whether the enterprise has made enough context, meaning, and accountability available for that answer to be trusted.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And coming to you, Barry, a CDO, obviously in Howden now and in other organizations before. So what's your perspective on this? Because it seems in most organizations, we're constantly adding that human context and it's not written down anywhere. Yes, there's cataloging and there's metadata, but I think we've perhaps not done such a good job as we could have done now that there's a scale issue with AI. So do you see organizations relying on that tacit or human knowledge? And what happens when AI starts using the data without automatically understanding that human knowledge?
What I would say was it shouldn't. First
okay,
of
in
all,
the first
right?
place.
I mean,
right.
like it shouldn't do it in a productionized way, right? If you're testing the model out, then of course it's actually quite useful for the AI to expose where it doesn't know that tacit knowledge. So in the development of the production thing, I can see it being quite useful because it could highlight where the risks are. If you press go on this thing, I think your best case scenario is that you've just added loads of cost because the manual checking and processes will come in through the back door again. So you've paid for the AI, you've paid for the original process, and now you're paying for some sort of new verification process. That's the best case because that means somebody, some human is getting it. In the worst case, of course, everyone understands how quickly errors can compound in a literally exponential way with AI, the loss of trust, and so on and so on. So for me, I'd use that as part of the development process And if you think that's not important, you're kidding yourself, because you're just layering more cost and more cost. Yeah, you'll be painting yourself as this productivity champion, but all you've done is create brand new manual processes and layering them on top. So we absolutely cannot think that AI has all the context it needs for, I think, the vast majority of use cases because of that tacit knowledge, especially in the mid to back office type productivity arena. I think in the kind of insight, giving you information, guiding you type stuff, perhaps less risky. But when you're going agentic, say, which is typically in the mid to back office, then I don't think you can work around that. You have to crack it and either document it or have the AI observe the human processes and then codify it for you to check that it's done it correctly.
Yeah, it's face into it then, really. It's like, yeah, by all means, run your pilot experiment, and every organization should be, but really think about where you're prioritizing that effort on where you have got, because there will be a variation in foundations, of course. So I guess pick the ones that are going to potentially work rather than expose those foundations. But if they are going to expose the foundation, do it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is, at risk of sounding like Eeyore the Grumpy Donkey from Winnie the Pooh, which is my usual mode, like if it looks too good to be true, it usually is. So unless you've had immaculately documented processes and incredible discipline from every single contractor, consultant, and employee you've ever had, then you'll get this to some degree.
Yeah. Which surely leads to frustration. So I think where you've said there, like we take a pilot, we experiment, and we put it into production, and then we get frustrations when it's not working, and it's not necessarily the AI's fault. So Lisa, pilots, people are talking like co-pilot at one end of the spectrum, RAG experiments, obviously implementation of generative AI. The early results can look very impressive, but the article argues that the difficult questions tend to emerge when organizations try to move from what we discussed there as controlled demonstration or pilot into real everyday business use. Questions about privacy, appropriate data use, accountability, assurance, whether the AI outputs can be genuinely trusted, and I guess can the data inputs be trusted as well. Are you seeing organizations move from that initial excitement into that real frustration?
Absolutely. We're definitely seeing both. Still the continued excitement and innovation. We are a data company, so we do have lots of data that is AI ready, governed, well documented, proceduralized, and the AI is working really well, and we're able to get those processes out into production. And then there's others where that's not so much, right? So you start operationalizing on the not so AI ready data, not so governed, not so well documented, and you very quickly find that gap, right? There's data not so clearly described. We're missing metadata. We're unsure of ownership. All of those things roll up into the teams having real frustration, real issue getting their innovations over the line, real issues with deployments, and generally being blocked by questions that we maybe can't answer. We don't know who to ask. We don't know whether we can trust the outputs. We don't know what the data was intended for or who the owner is. Sometimes our biggest blocker is that sign off to actually move this thing to production. Whose name goes on the line, right?
Okay, the one person.
Right. Who's accountable? Those can be really challenging.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely resonates. So yeah, Mark, coming to you, when organizations reach that point of frustration, the pilot has worked, technology looks promising, but it's still not becoming part of trusted everyday operations, maybe even just because of that like final sign-off product owner approval point. People then naturally ask, why is it not scaling? So in your experience, common root causes, I think we're touching, is it the AI? Is it the foundations? Is it the definitions? I feel like I'm a bit biased because I'm that sort of data management guy. But yeah, what are you seeing? What are your thoughts?
All right. From a advisory and consulting perspective, one thing we hear repeatedly is our pilot worked brilliantly. Why isn't the business adopting it? And to answer your question, usually it's not because the AI itself has failed. It's because the pilot was protected by SMEs, by humans who understood the data, the caveats, the definitions, so they made sure that worked in the pilot. You move into operations and you don't have that protection layer or that human layer because you're trying to move at AI speed, is why you've created that. So with that protection, the ownership gaps, the controls that need to be applied aren't understood without the SME being involved. That is also how many organizations have made data management work historically. Even very successful data management programs today largely have been built on the backs of manual labor. It's a very labor-intensive activity of doing data management. So what do I mean by brute force manual labor? I'm going to try to make you squirm in your seat a little bit. I'm going to read a long list of these nightmare examples of manual labor and ask you to mentally count how many of these you've personally lived through. So here we go. Reconciled fragmented data across systems. Check. Mapped data elements by hand. Interpreted inconsistent business definitions. Maintained spreadsheets of glossaries and ownership. Closed or chased data stewards for approvals. Investigated data quality breaks with a 24-hour SLA. Reconciled trades, customers, products, or accounts between platforms. Documented lineage after the fact. Checked reports manually before they were executed, before they went to executives. Assembled control evidence for audit. I'm almost done. Applied policy rules, review meetings, and translated business meaning into something others could trust. So I don't know about you, but I squirm when I see that list because I've lived that nightmare over and over. So now ask yourself, how many of those nightmares still exist in your organization today? And that's what you're trying to solve for AI to be effective in the organization. So many AI pilots, that same manual labor still is what makes the pilot work, but that human scaffolding does not scale. Once the pilot moves into real operations, these manual workarounds become adoption barriers, and that's why it's not being used consistently. The technology may look really impressive, but the enterprise foundations aren't yet mature enough for the AI to really rely on at scale.
Yeah, and surely what we're touching on perhaps, or most of those, is accountability, ownership, dare I say. So not data quality or technology problems, accountability problems. So when an AI-supported decision is made, organizations need to be clear about who owns the data. I think we take that as a given, that it relied on. Who owns a definition and business rules behind it, who's responsible for the controls around the model and, of course, feeding into it, and ultimately who's accountable for the outcome of the AI. So if those responsibilities are only implied, and I think we touch on this quite a lot in the article, rather than explicit, AI can expose, and I think it's the first time we've said amplify the gaps and the weaknesses and therefore the risks quickly. So Barry,
well, I was just going to say that accountability being attached to that AI process is what ultimately, all the way up to the C-suite and the board, creates that confidence in what the AI is generating.
Yeah, and touches on broader operating model for sure. So yeah, Barry, lead to the obvious question of ownership. And geez, we've been talking about data ownership for far too long, haven't we? And we're in a place where perhaps it is more relevant than ever. But in terms of AI readiness in an enterprise, who would you say owns it? Is it someone like yourself as a CDO? Because it depends so much on trusted data. Is it a chief tech officer? Is it sort of everyone? I don't quite know how that works. So what's your view on ownership of AI and AI readiness? And obviously, again, I lean towards the data underneath, but what are your thoughts?
I don't think it's the CDO.
Okay.
And I don't think it's everyone either, although that's a neat answer. That would be like a nice poster when everyone owns AI. You'd feel great about it until you try to figure out what exactly the hell you were on about. So yeah. I personally think there's no shortcut and you have to break down the elements for me, like you would with other things, starting from the business outcome or decision that's going to be made. by this AI. And that is the person whose P&L, that revenue or productivity or whatever sits on. The business executive, someone that sits on the GEC or exec or whatever. So then you start with who owns that decision? Good. Now, CDO should absolutely take responsibility for the data and the knowledge that feeds that model, and then lay out any potential risks or incompleteness or things that should be known about it. And that should then be overlaid with the overall appetite that the board sets for risk or use of AI. If the board hasn't discussed that, then they really should, and that should be clear. You've got the tech, CTO will own the tech, right? So if they've said, these are the off-the-shelf tools you use, and this is when you have to home brew it, and if you home brew a tool, this is the governance it goes through. They have to make sure that happens and those sign-offs are obtained. You've got the risk and independent challenge. Obviously, risk have to own that. And then depending on what format your CDO team's in, then the CDO can also own the product or model that sits behind that. But I'm aware that not all CDOs have that. That could be a part of tech, or it could be a part of a chief product officer or whatever. But for me, there's probably three layers, isn't there? There's the overall appetite and framework that the board must have discussed, and there must be something written down. And if it's not practical, then it's absolutely fine to ask the board for guidance. Then there's the business sponsor, who's the person who's going to book that revenue or productivity from the thing that's getting built. And then there's the people that are building it. And that's usually tech, data, with a little risk check. So it's not that neat an answer, in my opinion. It would be really say everyone. And it would be easy stroke stupid, I think, to say all sits with the data people, because you'll soon lose touch with the business. So I think it just needs a bit of a mature framework, and someone needs to write it down and make sure everyone agrees. And if they don't agree, ask them what bits they don't agree with, because it's better nutting this out now than getting to a pilot, realizing it doesn't work, and then every time you do a pilot, you've got this same pain. Just go through the pain once properly, live the pain, write it down, get people to sign it up. That's my view. No substitute for graft to get it right.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And then Lisa, I guess explicit ownership is at the core of what Barry said. So I know we've touched on it in some of the early conversations we've had here, but when that ownership is implied, someone else owns the data, someone else owns the decision, someone else owns the control, someone else owns the outcome, or maybe that's all ambiguous. Where do you see? I guess it's in when you review the AI pilot in the context of what we're talking about. What do you think? Where do those problems start to appear?
Yeah, they start to appear everywhere. But it's a cultural shift first, right? It's understanding that everyone is accountable to their piece, and together we're all accountable for it, right? Ownership specifically. Decisions may be made by somebody who isn't the owner. We can't have that. Rules may be documented by someone who maybe doesn't know all the rules, right? They may not know what its original intended use was and some of the logic that went into how it got to its current state, right? Both of those introduce significant risk. Problems arise in the data, knowing who's responsible for them. How do they get resolved? Introduces trust issues if we don't have that clearly documented and understood by the entire team, right? Not just the data people who own it, right? The business owners, the data owners, the technology owners, having them names on the line, right? We need to know who to contact in each of those different scenarios, because they're all part of the whole, right? And we have to have clear ownership of the whole, which is each of its component parts, so that we don't block progress, so that we don't stifle innovation, so that we don't create quality questions along the way.
Yeah, I think we did a piece of work with a client recently, and it was very sort of progressive thinking. But one of the first things that we did was we did a bit of a RACI matrix and even a risk matrix, and that was written down on paper in the context of a use case, like who is the product owner, who's going to own the outcome, who's going to own the technology, and yes, it's the CTO, but a delegate down and so on. So I feel like we're cycling over some of this. It's just how you do good change management, isn't it? And we seem to be being a bit distracted by the AI hype and rushing into things around the hype cycle and excitement. But yeah, maybe we just need to check ourselves. Yeah. Okay. So moving to what everyone talks about, garbage in, garbage out, bad data, Mark. I think it's too simple a diagnosis in this context. So AI doesn't just need clean data. Obviously, we want good quality data always to drive decision making, but it needs that information and context so that it can trust and understand. And we're saying that a lot. So what does AI actually need from enterprise information in order to produce reliable answers? I know you've listed some of the things that we've done badly in the past, but what does it need? Not just clean data, beyond that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't agree with you more that bad data, in my opinion, has become an unhelpful phrase because it's created a scapegoat, a way to defend AI because we don't have good data. Yeah, and it's more than that. So, it is that business context. And um, if you have 5 banks that line up the street here that are all using AI to create, a statistical answer based on what it knows in the world, you haven't provided that AI any understanding of your business, your risk tolerance, your value propositions, your product set, all of these different components that go into that business intelligence of understanding. And actually, the third in the series of these webinars is about business memory. So make sure you show up in 2 weeks. Don't skip governance next week, but in 2 weeks, it's going to be a deep dive on what is that business memory and how do you capture that business memory. I would suggest that it's enterprise architecture on steroids. It's really, forget enterprise architecture of 20 years ago that is a book of lists. I've listed all my technology. I've listed all my organization, but take that and turn it into, using knowledge graph and ontology, turn it into a connected set of knowledge about your business that you do bring those additional things in, like risk tolerance and so forth. And that becomes a very valuable input to AI, along with good quality data at the right time with the right ownership to the AI solution that you're driving.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So yeah, we will touch on that in a couple of weeks' time. And I do think some of it gets quite technical, but we're aiming to elevate that up so people can understand more, because there has to be business understanding and business impact of that clearly, rather than it be a technical geek out on vectors and knowledge graph and ontology, because some of that can lose people quite quickly. So focus on the outcome. So that'll be a really interesting conversation.
And bring our data expertise to the table. I mean, what we're describing there is a knowledge product. Manage that knowledge product like we manage the other data products in the organization so that it becomes a valuable asset.
Yeah, same practices. Yeah, good point. Okay, coming to you, Barry, and thinking about how we scale AI. Is there a list of questions that leaders should be asking about the information that AI models will rely on? Is it about data trust on the way in? Is it clarity of ownership? I think it probably comes back to your first point. Do we have to prove the data is approved and ready before we go into the AI case? I think we're probably saying yes, but you could experiment and you could see what the outcome is from the model. And presumably there's a fail fast aspect of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a question one would ask of the data, but I think you should be asking, can we explain, stop or reverse this? You need to be able to answer yes to probably all three. They'd get a bit more comfortable. How do you know if it still remains effective stroke accurate? So what monitoring and do people understand it? And what humans are in the loop and what does that really mean? Is it someone overworked just clicking next, next, next? Or is it someone actually reviewing the output in a structured way and documenting it? Not that I'm saying that the poor humans that are in these loops aren't doing anything other than clicking next, next, next. But you can see it being on the side of someone's desk, and the pressure for productivity would that'd be a tax on that, wouldn't it? And then is the information at the appropriate level? Is it permitted to be used? Right? I won't use is it good, is it bad? Because of course there's no such thing. Is it as authoritative as it should be for the use case? Someone should know that, and they should know who you pick the phone up to. If it's not, they should be able to answer that question. And what business knowledge does it depend on to understand what it's saying? Because it's probably unrealistic to suggest everyone's got the same taxonomy and language across massive organizations. So it needs to be clear. And if there's any room for ambiguity, one should know who you're going to call when that happens. And I think the question I would always ask is the obvious one that maybe someone knew ages ago before it got completely mangled out of shape. What decision or action am I actually going to make, or the AI going to make with this? Is that still the right one? Because if that's changed or it's not the right one, then the data's not the right data, I think. So I've just kind of lobbed some questions over. That's what I would ask. But again, it's to do with clarity and not assuming because a human's having a sniff somewhere down the process that it's all okay. Because humans did everything before and mistakes happened. So now we've got more things to do, the human things and the things where we're in the loop of the AI. So all of the productivity benefits and gains that people quote, I think are gross. I mean, gross is in they're not net of the effort needed to be in the loop, not gross is in absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, I guess they might be.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and you're also making me think, surely confidence in stopping. Like sometimes we get caught up in activity is progress and
There's
pushing
a cultural
forward.
thing there as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
I mean, I am no expert in this the soft people side of things. I've been a data person for too long. I think it's probably been hammered out of me. But if one is in a culture where it's not okay to say, do you know what? I'm not sure about this. I know we've spent X amount of money getting it to this point. I know go live's on Tuesday, and I know we presented it to the exec a couple of weeks ago, but can we just hit pause? There should be absolute safe environment for someone to do that with real senior support and almost celebrating the fact that someone's pressed that emergency button. I tell you, it makes a hell of a lot more noise if you press it after it's launched. So there is a cultural element to this, which I'm definitely not qualified to opine on. I try my best, but all of this relies on people saying what's on their mind rather than, well, I knew it would fail. Well, that data was never good enough for that. Or the servers were never going to be able to handle that much traffic. That's fireable, in my opinion. But saying it early isn't.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's a data-focused, AI-focused conversation. Still comes back to culture, accountability, people, operating model. So
someone's pressing a button
it's interesting.
For now,
indeed.
Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Barry. Lisa, in the article, we highlight that AI, and I think we touched on this already briefly, AI can take information collected or approved for one purpose, and especially when we think about that from a data privacy protection perspective and permitted use it in a completely different context, because clearly it doesn't have that context and understanding. I think it builds on what Mark and Barry have said. So from a privacy and compliance perspective, which I know is a core part of your role, but surely reputational perspective for the organization as well, is this catching firms out? What's your view on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Top of mind for lots of companies. Taking data out of context, being unclear about any particular privacy rules, laws, or otherwise applicable legislation, data rights, contractual obligations, sourcing constraints, all of those things play into, can I do what I'm trying to do with this data? And without the proper gates in place to verify that, you're putting your AI in a really bad place. But it's not the AI's fault. It'll look like it is the AI's fault, but it's not the AI's fault, right? You've got to have those attributes. You've got to provide the AI all of the information that it needs to understand, and that the AI can trust the data that it's getting. We talk a lot about the people trusting the data. We've got to build the information in a way that the AI can trust that it's going to do a good job with what we're giving it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really easy to think about data protection and privacy there, but your point on contractual obligations, like market data in financial services, I can just foresee people pumping their market data into a platform and the AI going crazy, and there are so many restrictions built into those market data contracts. So that is a tricky situation.
Very tricky.
Yeah. I don't know why Zoom has added me twice to the meeting now. So maybe the Zoom AI is getting a bit carried away, but there's now a clone of me in the meeting.
You have to say it twice. Too good. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to take that, Barry. Okay, moving on. If we move into what the article talks about around the speed mismatch and that AI moves faster than traditional governance, it's a really strong point in the article. AI acts continuously across large volumes of information. Governance, not always, but often quite traditional, still depends on people reviewing documents, interpreting policies, and so on, and fundamentally manual processes. So we really have machine speed execution running on human speed governance, and risk builds up in the gap. So there's a couple of parts to this, and control latency is the next one. But Lisa, coming back to you here, are you seeing AI moving faster than organizations can review, approve, and assure what it's doing? We have touched on this. And does that mean that controls now need to be built in a different way? So surely automation. So the speed and scale of the AI and that governance and control mechanism catching up. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, and we're needing to build AI into our governance and compliance tooling to keep up, right? We can't be a bottleneck. We can't build massive manual manpower worth of teams to monitor these massive amounts of data that we have. The AI is absolutely moving faster than anybody else could track it and govern it. So we definitely are looking at how far upstream in the processes can we build the tooling, catch issues and errors as soon as possible. Checking processes have to be set up to scale. We need to make sure that we're building them out in a way that we can deploy them quickly into the next sets of data as they come up, right? The tooling is allowing us to at least attempt to keep up, whereas I'm certain that there's a lot of places that are really falling behind.
Yeah. We were working with a client, and the drift and hallucination. This isn't really new. And I know it's the probabilistic nature of generative AI, but machine learning models and the safety of machine learning models and testing the outputs, making sure they're still doing what we want them to do. And that risk of a generative probabilistic model drifting and hallucinating, and we have to have automated control in there, don't we, to spot that. So absolutely. I hope people really know that and are making sure that's built in when they're using generative AI models. But yeah, maybe drop in the chat and let us know if you've got that nailed. Okay, I mentioned control latency. So Barry, this is the idea of the gap between AI doing something, the organization being able to understand, govern, or correct it. So I guess fundamentally a decision being made, and then the risk and governance of that keeping up. Maybe you touched on something similar to this in your Databricks interview around insight lag. So is this a real cost around that gap between the AI doing something and the governance keeping up? It feels like it is, but are you seeing this?
But I think it relates a bit to what we discussed earlier, in that I think it's acceptable to be slower and have that lag the first time you do something.
Yeah.
It's unacceptable to take shortcuts to pretend it's not there, because it will get bigger and bigger until it goes pop. And ultimately, you'll lose organizational value, in my opinion, because you're just absorbing manual effort, aren't you, as well, by trying to keep up and not doing it properly. There's also this thing about learning loops, and you're doing your first pilot for the first time. There is a lag. People are going to moan. You're going to have to suck it up and do it properly. You're not going to get it right first time, and then you need to be able to have a look at what's caused that lag, and then build it into the next pilot. It'll be shorter and shorter and shorter, and eventually, hopefully, it will become negligible and not so much of a pain. But the pressure of getting stuff done so quickly, being launched, so there's some metric somewhere that says that it's gone live. I think, again, we're creating and masking learning and effort. So you do 8 pilots, you'll have that same lag 8 times X, if that's the lag. But if you've done it X the first time and taken a little learning from it, there's X minus a bit on the next one and the next one and the next one. Those learning loops will keep you going. And that's the long game.
Okay.
And I think that we're at the stage of AI now. I know it's in its infancy, it's going to get better and everything. But I think there's been enough people having a go at this and realizing this stuff that it would, again, be quite inexcusable for a senior data professional to not take the learnings and build it in and understand what that lag is, as opposed to thinking it's just a technology or it's a technology problem or an adoption problem. It's not. It's just a product problem. If you've got proper product people that will hold you to account to launch a product, then they'll tell you that that is how things get better and better and better. These features are added, and then suddenly things get quicker, and you don't hit that problem again. It's madness to keep making the same mistake again and again. But that's where you get to if you want to reduce that lag immediately and almost mask it with the operational processes and new backdoor little manual things you have to do.
Yeah. I like that learning.
And I think
loops.
some of that too goes back to that cultural shift, right? The more that teams understand and are aware of the processes and they know that we've got to build in these controls and why they're important, understanding that why, right? Knowing what happens if we don't do those things is part of the culture of we want it to be right. We want it to go smoothly. We want it to deliver as expected on the outcomes. And I think that we can collectively get faster with it when the participants have that cultural mind shift into, I am going to design my flow, my processes, my operationalized stream to take into account those gates, and I'm going to be prepared with all of the material that I need to pass through those gates quickly, right? I think that helps the overall process there.
And surely when that doesn't happen, we must be working in silos. Like if those learning loops and cross-pollination of learning isn't happening, then people are working in silos and making the same mistakes in parallel or whatever. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Lisa, coming back to you. So, this control latency point then, the gap between an AI processing an outcome at scale and the governance keeping up. Regulated, complex environments, you and Barry are both from financial service organizations. Is it more risky in a regulated or complex environment, or is it the same for everyone? Or what are your thoughts?
Absolutely, and it's not the same for everyone. Even within our company, it's not the same for everyone because some parts of the businesses are highly regulated and others are not. And there's different processes that we have in each of those areas, right? The different data sets, the different use cases for products, the different use cases for customers. Lead us into having to manage a couple of different governance streams that is fine. Everything isn't, one for one across the board, and we're okay with that. Yeah. The most highly regulated and complex are going to have, additional board reviews and certifications within their organization, within, their group of accountable parties and additional peripheral compliance teams and additional risk evaluations and lots of additional pieces, and they know that, and that's part of their culture, though. They understand because they are highly regulated, because they're that complex, they need to have those additional gates and approvals.
Yeah, and ironically, surely business context, application of regulation within a business and within sub-businesses is part of your business and part of your business understanding and context that we want the AI to know. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Mark, coming to you. So if the answer is not another policy, it's not human governance, a steering committee, or another impressive AI demo that helps us presumably solve that we don't need policy or steering committees because the project management AI coming into play, of course. What really has to change inside the organization? So we've touched on ownership, we've touched on automation of governance and controls. so that we can make AI scale? Is there like maybe three key points? We've touched on them. Maybe it's just a bit of a takeaway on the three key points that you see.
Yeah, so to make it simple, quick, if I could change one thing, it would be to stop reducing AI readiness to bad data. The real issue is whether the organization can deliver good quality, controlled data at the speed AI requires. And that means governance by design, not governance by check and committee and so forth. So when the controls are automated, observable, and continuously evidenced by that design, you've automated a control environment. And that's when data becomes genuinely AI ready, because it's not just good data, it's data at the speed that AI needs to operate at.
Yeah, okay. And Barry, from your internal CDO perspective, is there one thing that you're sort of focused on changing in the Howden operating model to help make this work?
Well, I think it's about understanding the operations. I need to educate myself more about what actually happens in the operations of a business. And a role that I don't see very often is kind of a global process owner role or something similar that I think is a massive unlock for AI.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that are going to make sure that the processes are changed properly in the way that the business works day to day. Otherwise, I worry that I'm doing a bit of a Jenga thing. I'm kind of building things higher and higher with cooler and cooler things, and it all looks really neat at the top. So I really I'm pushing myself to understand what the actual process is, what people actually do, and who owns that. Because usually it's not as simple as I think, but never is. There's a reason why things like they are today, and we're just replacing something with another thing that fixes one of the things, but another thing breaks.
Yeah.
So I think this problem is as old as organisations, isn't it? And process improvement. This is just another tool.
Yeah.
I don't want to reduce AI just to that, but if it's going to work, it needs to be in some sort of process somewhere.
Yeah. I'm pleased you said that, because we should always take things back to business process. We should make all a business does is run processes contextual to that organization to achieve an outcome. I know it does diminish it, and it's not that simple, but yeah, I like it personally. Lisa, anything to add? One thing that you would fix now?
Yeah, and I think it's something that we've had in progress for quite a while. It's using the automation controls, using the governance design as early in the process as you can, because we can't use humans to keep up with the pace, right? The speed of the data is far outgrowing any ability for us to think that anything that is a manual process today can continue. We've got to have the time and the tooling put in place for AI-enabled governance, AI-enabled quality checking and controls, monitoring, and implementation.
Great, thank you. Right, we're 49 minutes in, which I can't believe. So for 1 minute now, there is going to be an absolute shameless plug for Ortecha's AI data readiness reality check. So Mark, I've used 5 seconds of your 1 minute. So can you tell us a bit more about this?
Our reality check is designed to move quickly from diagnosis to action to get to business value. It helps leaders identify where AI use cases are most exposed, which data foundations are not yet ready, and what needs to be fixed first. So in a matter of weeks, this is a short blitz kind of approach. We help identify specific gaps, limiting AI performance, prioritize the fixes that matter most, and have a 30, 60, 90-day roadmap coming out of that. So what the organization does with that, it depends. Could be resolving one exposed AI, could be overhauling and building a broader AI operationalization program. So it all starts with a conversation. We'd love to have a conversation with you that kind of talk through where you were and see whether this reality check would be valuable for you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. So we're going to shortly move to questions. Before that, we'll just do a quick key takeaway. And then we'll dive into we'll do the question first, then we'll go to the takeaways, because it might reorientate some of them. So clearly, I think every organization is using some AI in some way, but there is a vast level of maturity and difference in maturity from obviously like Copilot rollout, get it onto people's desktops to advanced models being built. To obviously that is right and is for the organization to decide where they're at. So just to, I guess to summarize key things that we've touched on, all about data foundations that should help us scale AI. Trust is clearly a key one. Do we trust the data? Ownership, we've said ownership and accountability, we've said a huge amount. We've touched on the operating model points. Business context is one that I think if you're a data geek, you've been thinking about this for a while, but I think it's really come to the fore in this conversation in recent times around how we can ground our clever AI models more so than we've had to with this human and tacit knowledge that we've talked about today. We've talked about good old change management and change management practices, and actually some of this isn't new. It's just doing change right and fail fast, confidence to stop, some of those things. So yeah, I think it's really think about those points of good quality data foundations underneath. Think about those gaps in the risk and the speed that AI makes you move and how your traditional governance needs to move into, not just governance, but data management needs to move into automation. But yeah, we'll dive into some questions and then we'll wrap up with some key takeaways and aim to wrap up on the hour. So we have had some questions, and this is where this one is interesting. So I'm just going to read this to the floor and one of you can chime in. So how are you measuring business trust in the AI's outputs on a day-to-day basis? I'm not sure I want to answer that, but anyone willing to give it a go?
I don't know.
I don't think
After you.
I don't think there is an actual measurement of trust that we use consistently. And there's definitely the difference in data that we are commercializing, right? Our data products out to customers externally versus the data that we have internally for things like KPIs and metrics and performance and other internal kind of back office data. But I do think that we are able to look at kind of holistically, is the data meeting the use case, and how confident are we that the data is doing that?
Okay, thanks, Lisa. Barry, anything to add?
I'd say no, given time. Nothing that's going to be as useful as what Lisa said.
And surely it has to, I hate to say it, but surely it does depend, doesn't it? It probably depends on the use case and the
answer is
ownership
always it
of that
depends.
use case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe trust is in the eye of the beholder.
Yes.
Good one.
Let's go with that.
Same thing with risk, right? How risky is this? Well, it depends on what you're planning to do with it, right?
Yeah, and both sides should be considered because you could be saying you trust it, but there's risk within our next step. So yeah, that consideration of both is really important, isn't it? Mark, you mentioned enterprise architecture earlier. I know Barry has then mentioned process, which is a lovely connection down into enterprise architecture thinking into how we really understand our business processes. But Mark, what role do you see enterprise architecture playing in documenting data processes and being AI ready? Because I think this really varies, doesn't it? I've seen good enterprise data and enterprise data architecture diminish over recent years, and maybe it's having a bit of a comeback.
I think what we're seeing with some of the enterprise architecture tooling capability is they are bringing ontology and knowledge graph into play in a way that you can harvest out of lots of your other operational tools and bring that content. So even just thinking about data management. So if you've got a capability in your enterprise architecture model of data management, how do you build that out? How do you formalize the business processes? And you're capturing metadata. How do you bring metadata into your enterprise architecture tool in a way that you are linking all of your data together? And truly, some of the tools are moving towards becoming a digital twin of your business environment. But from a data perspective, a digital twin of your data environment that allows you to manage it in a very different way.
And feed into the AI to give it that knowledge and context. Yeah. Okay.
It is that context.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, I think maybe one more question here. It's quite broad. So Barry or Lisa, are there some use cases, clearly for AI and thinking about the data foundations, you've seen be more successful than others?
At risk of answering with an obvious answer, so you can tell me to play again if you like. The ones that always are better are where someone's asked an actual business question directly versus coming up with something that is solving a particular issue that we think we've seen. And therefore, the person asking the question is the de facto final product owner who's seeing it all the way through. They've asked a question. We've not said, is there anything we can do to help you, that proactively come to us? I think sometimes we spend too much time thinking clever thoughts when actually the right questions are out there by people who are, in my case, selling the business, that making our clients happy and understand what our clients want. So I would say, just do that. And if you're in the lucky position where you do all that and you've exhausted all the good questions, by all means, come up with clever, beautiful thoughts. There's an element of humbleness, I think, that's required, that it's taken me much longer than it should have to understand that just do what people need. And they know best. Customers know best, don't they? Whether they're internal or external.
Yeah, it's a build it and they will come, isn't it? Don't build it thinking they'll come. Just answer the business questions. Yeah,
it's a prevalent mindset in our industry, in the data industry. I'm talking about. It's easier said than done, isn't it? But just do the things that people actually want.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. We'll do key takeaways and then we'll close. And I think we'll be just about on the hour. So coming to you first, Lisa, one key takeaway and only one, and maybe something that you wish you'd known like 6 to 12 months ago before this AI hype cycle really kicked in.
Yeah, I would say that it's definitely spend the time to focus on that culture shift first. That really drives understanding the ownership and accountability, understanding the operating models, really getting that helps the rest of it to fall into place.
Okay.
I think some of that often comes on after the fact.
Yeah, indeed. And Barry, one key takeaway?
Don't replace a bunch of manual processes that you've automated away with some others that are in the shadows just to make it look like the AI is working smoothly.
Well, so don't replace your robotic process automation with AI just for the sake of it. Okay. And Mark, coming to you for one key takeaway.
Data management has struggled for a couple decades with getting business ownership of the data. The business process that creates the data has to own the data. And that's because we put too much manual labor in the process. If we can get rid of the manual labor and just use the brain rather than the brawn of the business, we will solve the big problem. And that comes through automation like Barry was describing.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I think we've got some good little snippets for today. Brain, not brawn, and some others that we've said earlier on. I'm going to get these posted on LinkedIn next week. So we are almost on the hour. So thank you very much, Lisa, Barry, and Mark. That's a great conversation. I guess key takeaway, enterprise AI does not become reliable because the AI gets better on its own. It becomes reliable when those enterprise data foundations are put in place, considered. And when we say that, we're talking about the data, understanding of the data, the ownership, the context, clearly the quality, but not just bad data, the governance, the controls, the accountability, and being able to evidence that. And if those foundations are unclear, AI is going to expose them, and it's going to expose them pretty fast. And it's not just in your pilot stalling or failing, it's a broader perception of what you do as a team and what the organization's doing with progressive tooling and capability. So we believe, obviously, better to expose or fix those foundations deliberately before they're exposed by AI. Please don't stop doing AI. Continue. It ain't going away. This is a fundamental shift in how businesses operate, but maybe think about building those foundations incrementally as you go, whilst enabling your AI delivery. So we are basically done. We're 1 minute over. As we said, this is one of three webinars that we're doing. Next week is focusing on the governance, readiness, making AI controllable. The week after, maybe a week after that, enterprise memory readiness, making AI accurate. So I'm sure Louise has dropped the links in the chat. So thank you. I've enjoyed that. Great conversation. I hope you've enjoyed listening. Please do feel free to reach out to us and connect with us afterwards on LinkedIn. And we're happy to take questions. You can bring those to Ortecha or clearly contact Lisa and Barry. I'm sure via LinkedIn is the normal approach, isn't it? So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Mark, Lisa, Barry, and
Thanks, Pete.
we'll see you next week.
Take care, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you.